Welcome to Trail Mix. I'm your host, Myrna Dhaliwal. This podcast explores the stories and advice of professionals from all fields to inspire young people as they figure out their own paths. Today, I'm joined by attorney Michael D. Lane, who shares his experiences in the law field and offers great advice for anyone interested in pursuing a career in this field. Thank you for listening. Let's get started.
My name is Michael Lane. I'm a local attorney in Dublin. I work with a law firm called Greenberg Traurig LLP, where I practice uh, commercial litigation, largely focusing on trade secrets and intellectual property. I've been practicing. I graduated law school in 2005, so I've been practicing almost 20 years, and so, I've been there a lot, been to state court, federal court, uh, been to trials. I mean, done pretty much anything you can expect to for litigation. And I'm at the point where, it's a lot of fun to just give advice or just talk to people about how they can access the court because it's a lot easier today than it was 20 years ago, for sure. There's just been a lot of changes.
Yeah, cool. I just find it really interesting how everyone discovers their own path to the career of their choice, basically. Was law something you always wanted to do, or just come about later?
That's something I've always wanted to do, but it certainly wasn't a linear path from high school to being to being a lawyer.
Mhm.
There's because I mean, honestly, there's some preparation you could do for law, but like for example, you could just start right away as a clerk or an assistant, a legal assistant in like a local law office and get a feel for what it's like to have to put together filings and work with potential witnesses or clients. So you could do that just to get a sense if you actually enjoy the job and it's something you want to do. But as far as like legal training, I mean, it's not quite like becoming a doctor, but there's 4 years of undergrad where you're exposed to a lot of different opportunities and things you might be interested in. And so that's, some people might trail off there. And then after that, there's, things you're trained for in undergrad is not necessarily related to legal work
Mhm.
because there's not that much undergrad could do. So maybe you have a little bit, maybe do a little bit of legal work after that, and then 3 to 4 years of law school, depending if you go full or part time. So yeah, it's a process. And for me personally, uh, and I think your question about me, right? If it was as
Yeah.
like a straight, yeah, for me personally, I always knew I was interested in law. There's certain aspects of it that like in order to be a lawyer, you probably have to really enjoy reading and writing and organizing things on page that way. And I loved reading, so I was always, and a lot of classic lawyers are good writers and
Mhm.
speak and write good speeches as well. So there's things you could read for that. So that's kind of how you get exposed to it. But it wasn't necessarily something I wanted to do for career. And right after college, before law school, I worked at an ad agency as an art director because I was also interested in art
Mhm.
and painting and graphic design. And then we ran in like legal issues with regards to like trademarks or intellectual property protection for those, and that sort of led me to law school a few years after my undergrad. So yeah, it was something I always wanted to do, but it wasn't necessarily something I wanted to commit to until I guess I explored like other types of careers first.
That makes sense. And then what was it specifically that drew you into the fields that you're in right now, like the ones you specialize in, like intellectual property and labor law?
I went to Berkeley, so my
Mhm.
my 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 law school is Berkeley, and Berkeley has a very high concentration for they call it hard IP, like patent litigation,
Mhm.
and so when you go, and so a lot of the best classes, and a lot of the instructors that you want to work with, like a lot of connections in the community or
Mhm.
are in patent litigation, and so that sort of led me into that particular field when I first graduated law school. But other than that, like I said, I was an artist and a graphic designer, so I'd had a lot of experience with trademarks and copyrights, and that's kind of fun when your cases are about things that you're sort of excited about. And trade secrets, I'm not, do you know what trade secret is? Or are you familiar with
I'm
that?
somewhat familiar because of like a mock trial, but not like fully like I don't know too much about it.
Okay, trade secrets are really fun because
Yeah.
for trade secrets, it's basically it can be so if you're suppose there's like a family owned restaurant and
Hmm.
they make like the best um I don't know. Let's say they make like a really good omelet or something. This is
Okay.
like common in Taiwan. There's like certain stalls where they specialize in omelets for like 60 years. That's the only
Yeah.
thing they make in their stall. So they're really good at it. It might be a trade secret how they make that one omelet.
Hmm.
Or for example, or there could be like some family, and this is true too. Like there's families that do fireworks shows and they've done it for 100 years and they're like specialists. There could be like a secret way like putting together a fireworks show.
Yeah.
So these secrets are protected against other people stealing them or like finding out the secret recipe uh, in a wrong way. Like someone comes to help out in the kitchen and they're secretly taking notes or making a recording, and then they
Yeah.
use that for themselves, right? So that's the trade secret law. So the reason why it's fun is because um, the people who create these secrets are it's very personal to them. And it's sort of, it's the crown jewels to them.
Yeah.
Even if it's like making a special omelet, this is like an omelet they've taken years to develop, so
Hmm.
it means a lot to them that this is protected. And then you take it to a level of a company. I mean, entire company could be built off of certain trade secrets or way of doing things where the company will go out of business if someone steals them. So the cases matter a lot. Like even if it's not a high dollar amount,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a huge commitment to see it through and make sure it's protected. So I mean that makes the case more exciting for a couple of reasons. One, like I said, I was a reader, and again, you have to have a sense of curiosity if you want to do law.
Yeah.
But I love learning about different technologies and different career paths or things people do for a living. So that's kind of fun, like learning how the secret works because that's part of it.
Yeah.
Um, and I could give an example too if you want me to for like
Yeah.
something
Please.
else.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like a company trade secret. Do you know 3M?
I'm familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. I think they started off with post-it notes with the special glue on the
Yeah.
back,
Yeah.
doesn't stick. Yeah, and then they expanded into like a lot of different like chemical or plastic type of
Hmm.
applications, and they made these incredible scrubbers. And so they had like a former employee that was this is like a trade secret they've been developing for decades, decades to put
Yeah.
together, and so it was extremely important to them to how to keep that protected. And so it was exciting just learning about the whole process,
Yeah.
and then protecting something that meant a lot to the company.
That's really interesting. I just think it's amazing how we're able to actually hear about a lawyer's journey because I think every person has like a different career that they intend to like follow through since they've like maybe even like become aware of what they want to do in life. And I really love to hear about like some standout moments from your career. Are there any like memorable cases or things you've handled through those cases in the past that you think are really interesting or could be very insightful to the listeners?
Yeah, interesting how like that, like just that they meant something to me, or like
Yeah,
they
or
helped
any
along the path
experience
of.
that you've learned from them. Maybe it's like a new idea that you formed after being involved in these cases.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I assume every pathway is different. For me, I think the initial hurdle was just there's a barrier to entry to practicing law,
Hmm.
especially in California. There's a lot of procedures and processes that you have to do just to file a complaint.
Hmm.
So just overcoming that initial hurdle of how to get things done, which takes some time because there's so many different procedures for so many different types of filings, and getting them straight and figuring out how to find the answers. And that's why I was saying that, if you want to make that hurdle shorter,
Yeah.
right now, like a high school student could work at a law office
Hmm.
and start working through those, and then it'd make the hurdle a lot easier. But once you get past that and you start to get comfortable, like the nuts and bolts of practicing and uh, and arguing. Um, there's sometimes like for me at least, because because I work for a firm, I
Hmm.
don't. have a lot of opportunities to work for like an individual person.
Mhm.
Usually it's a company. So, the cases where I've gotten to work for someone, uh, where it really mattered to them, like I was saying, and it
Yeah.
was really important to them was, kind of stand out. Like there's sometimes if you have a big client, like for example, JP Morgan Chase Bank or something,
Mhm.
in order to keep that relationship, you do work, work that's sort of like smaller scale, but it like keeps the client relationship going. So I had a chance to do like a TRO one time, and the woman that I got the it's a restraining order to stop an angry customer from harassing from
Okay.
harassing a bank manager,
Mhm.
and so she was so happy when I got it, that she hugged me and said, told me that changed her life.
Yeah.
And it's not I don't get that opportunity that much. I'm not a policeman or a fireman where I guess usually when I show up, people are like, oh shoot, what what do we have to do?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
could be expensive and not fun. But I'm like it's kind of like going to see a doctor for a surgery or something. You
Yeah.
just got to prepare for recovery. So yeah, so getting that kind of appreciation is a lot of fun. So I like this sort of like single party opportunities, where you're working
Mhm.
with someone and that happens with trade secrets too. So yeah, those kind of stand out to me where I could work
Mhm.
for like individuals. And then like I said, figuring out how things work. Um, I think when I started off doing patent litigation, this was back in 2006, 2007.
Mhm.
And at that time, like they were just starting to get into dis I'm not discovery, which is this concept when you sue someone, you basically get to ask for whatever's related to the case, and they
Mhm.
make objections. It goes back and forth.
Mhm.
So back then, it started to be, bankers' boxes full of the records that people would look for because um, technology was just catching up, with the amount of discovery that parties were asking for in patent litigation. So in that case, in one of the cases I was representing Apple, and they get sued for they at least back then because they were so successful with the iPod.
Yeah.
And have you ever used an iPod, or is that?
I think my mom had one when I was really young,
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah, it looks kind of clunky now a
Mhm.
little bit, but it looks sort of like futuristic type. But
Yeah.
but back then, I mean, it was like a game changer,
Mhm.
the iPod, because everyone had like they didn't have like a flash memory device like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, the iPod was amazing. And development of the iPod, and so I got to read uh, the emails and communications because not many, I don't think, man, I don't think many people communicate text back then, but
Mhm.
emails and communications between like Steve Jobs and a core group of like 3 or 4 people that he was
Yeah.
working with in cubicles until like 4 in the morning every night, eating pizza together. Like
Yeah.
this small little brain trust at
Mhm.
Apple that completely turned around Apple's fortunes. Because
Yeah.
Apple, yeah, wasn't like a huge company until well, it was, but I mean, they kind of gone down until they revived it with the iPod, and
Mhm.
uh, and it was so much fun, like reading that because seeing his thoughts and stuff was fun. So it was interesting,
Yeah.
like seeing
That's
how it was developed. A lot of thought went into every single aspect of the
yeah.
iPod. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that, but I think a lot of listeners appreciate hearing like firsthand experiences that like we weren't even born back then. Like I was born in 2008, and like all these things have happened, like whatever. But I think law just seems like um a field that's like constantly changing because for like high schoolers now it seems a little harder to get that experience because companies are more they're developing a lot faster, and I think they just want more actual experience rather than like pulling along like kids who aren't really like experienced enough. But I think if they're willing to, they can get that position. And a lot of young people listening might be curious about what it actually takes to get into law. Do you have any advice um, that you could give to someone who's just starting to think about following this career?
For high school or for college or like how young?
It can be for high school and college or whatever you think is best. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for high school, I think getting a wide breadth of experience and critical thinking skills is really important.
Mhm.
And you could you could ask, like, you probably go to any partner or law firm, they would tell you that that
Yeah.
there's, like and a lot of this comes from the liberal arts, not necessarily like hard science,
Hmm.
but liberal arts for reading, voraciously reading, and putting together essays and just exploring different topics. Getting that kind of a background. And maybe high school, trains you. I have a couple high schoolers of my own,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, I don't get an opportunity to see exactly what they're doing as much
Yeah.
because they feel like I try to take it over if they ask me for help on an essay.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I'm not sure. I think, but I think Dublin's like fantastic. They have
Hmm.
so many opportunities for skills like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's something that high schoolers could start right now, just expand their minds and just practicing writing and thinking about things and think about arguments and because a lot of what law is you have so much facts and it's kind of chaos and
Yeah.
information. You have to organize it and make it orderly, and you're sort of like building a narrative, and that's all stuff you learn from high school. So that's one thing. But specific for jobs, unfortunately, there's not much you could be qualified for at high school, but it's kind of early to try to become a paralegal. But you could, just volunteer at a local law office. I know there's a lot right here in Dublin. I mean,
Hmm.
they're not handling trade secret cases. They're more geared towards like personal injury or I know there's like ticket crushers, there's or like traffic incidents or and yeah, restraining orders probably,
Yeah.
criminal incidents. So I mean, there's so many different law firms you could, and then they're probably desperate for help, where you could call and just ask,
Okay.
as like an assistant or intern if you wanted to,
Hmm.
and just get a feel for how it works at that level. And it might be fun. I mean, those are like really small offices, and so you get to know everyone pretty intimately. And they probably would have you run to the courthouse. I know people that have done that in high
Hmm.
school, and then they've all become lawyers after that, so it didn't turn them off to the field. So that's like one thing. That sounds interesting. I don't, is that the kind of thing you're talking about, like
Yeah, that
that?
was, yeah.
Yeah, like that's one opportunity. Just just so you could volunteer, like
Hmm.
intern, or get a job, at a law office and see what it's like. And then as usually you have to at least have a little bit of post post high school education. Not necessarily though, but you know, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm thinking out loud about a paralegal job.
No
Like what you
worries.
really, yeah. It's like a paralegal is a little more training involved. Well, a
Hmm.
lot more training involved than that. But I mean, just to get started, it's more like dedicating yourself to an aspect of the legal career.
Hmm.
And then that's something else you can think about too, is being a paralegal.
Hmm.
And a lot of paralegals become lawyers, because lawyers rely on them heavily to do a lot of work, and the paralegals start thinking, gosh, I'm doing the same amount of work as like a
Yeah.
third year lawyer. Why am I being paid, or why am I why
Yeah.
am I being paid this rate? I should be making it like what they're making or doing what they're
Yeah.
doing. So then they end up going to law school full or part time and become great, fantastic, the best lawyers out there are former paralegals. so
Yeah.
they so they end up becoming lawyers after that if they're interested. So that's so there's certain ways, there's certain steps along the way. I mean, the
Mhm.
key is, like I said, though, there's no and I think you actually said that. Like, it's what you said actually is completely true. You must have talked to other lawyers. Like, you must have heard this before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything new. Yeah, the key is, like you said, there's no one path.
Yeah.
And even like whatever side quests you go on, on your way to law school, it's
Yeah.
all going to be relevant and useful.
Hmm.
It's all going to be, you're going to rely on all that experience you have, as a lawyer, and just even talking to clients, making connections with people or with ideas. It's all that's valuable. There's,
Hmm.
so you don't necessarily, is what I'm saying, you don't necessarily have to like volunteer at a law firm or become a paralegal. I mean,
Yeah.
that's more of if you just want to see if you have an interest.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, I think you mentioned this before, but are there any habits or skills that you think would be um like most useful for people and like what they should start developing now so they can use it during their actual career or even during college?
Mm. I mean, study habits, um, and efficiency
Yeah.
probably are like critical. I think habits like those you almost have to develop when you're young because it's hard
Mhm.
to do when you're older to like, you know, retrain yourself to organize, you know, organize your work area
Yeah.
differently. Yeah. So I mean, probably like study habits. Um, yeah, I mean, I already mentioned like reading. If you don't enjoy
Yeah.
reading, I would think about a different career than law. That's basically what you do all day
Yeah.
is read. Um, so yeah. Um, study habits. I'm not, you know, like I said, law school is there's a lot of books about law school. Have you ever heard of a
Yeah.
book called 1L by Scott
I think
Turow?
I might be wrong, but is it the book that like the first year college students or first year law
First year law
school?
student.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you read it?
Yeah. No, I haven't read
Okay.
it, but I've seen it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's lots of books like this, and there's a movie called Paper Chase.
Hmm.
They're old. I mean, they're before my time, but they're still uh law school is like transformative in some ways. So a lot of a lot of skills in terms of being able to put together law like fence posts and apply facts to it, you learn as a 1L. Like it's just a different way of thinking and different way of approaching. So you don't necessarily have to like start training those things now because you're going to pick them up, as long as you go. I think the kinds of things you can do before law school are largely related to whether you want to make the commitment because it's a commitment. I mean, you're taking yourself out of the workforce for 3 years, so
Yeah.
you don't get paid. Law schools are extremely expensive. So a lot of people go to law school on loans. It's extremely hard to get a scholarship to law school unless it's heavily, unless you're like number one in your class or something, um, or like a traditionally disadvantaged like community or something. Like maybe
Hmm.
there's scholarships there, but yeah. So it's a heavy commitment. It's 3 years, which is a long time especially until you start getting the hang of it, a lot of studying, at the front end. Yeah. So I mean, if you figuring out if that's something you want to do, I think is something that could be useful, before you start committing to it. Because there's a lot of people that drop out of law school.
Yeah.
I started actually I started at Santa Clara. This kind of
Mhm.
what you're saying about path,
Yeah.
like, and I don't, yeah. So I started at Santa Clara University for law school, and and it's a pretty big class there,
Yeah.
extremely competitive, especially, extremely competitive. Where in some cases, people had literally torn pages out books, that you needed
Yeah.
to look at, for your exams,
Yeah.
um, and then, uh, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, what I was going to say was a lot of people that started in total gunners, like sitting in the front of the room, raising their hand to every question. Not
Yeah.
all of them actually graduated. Like a lot of them decided after
Yeah.
1 year, this is not what I want to do. And I remember
Hmm.
like I had this conversation. I got involved with a great study group with a lot of people. Like I ended up being number one in my class, and then I transferred
Okay.
to Bolt or
Mhm.
Berkeley, which is how I ended up at Berkeley. But it was an amazing study group. Like, number five in our class transferred with me to Berkeley.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and so it was an amazing study group. And one of them at the end, like at the end of the first semester, she'd done well in all the exams because there's still a little margin for error. I mean, basically you need like A pluses in every class.
Yeah.
You can't even get an A. There's still a margin for error. And she worked really hard. And then she said, I just don't see this. I don't think this is for me, and she
Hmm.
compared it to like climbing like a rat, like to the top of the ladder, like
Yeah.
with all the other rats, and like climbing over their heads and stuff is not what she wanted to do, which is not how I looked at it at all. Like I thought it was
Yeah.
super fun, like wow, this is like a puzzle that you're figuring out. I
Yeah.
really loved it, but for her it was like torture, having to
Hmm.
put me in that position. And then she just left after 1 year, and now she's like a sort of like a wellness advisor for attorneys, where she has, like leads like retreats and
Yeah.
psychological sessions for counseling. Yeah. So she ended up finding something else related to the field that she was more interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. Yeah. So if you could figure that out before going to law school, if maybe you're
Hmm.
not interested in it, save yourself a lot of time, a lot,
Yeah.
a lot of money. But but yeah. Does
Yeah,
that
I
kind of
think
answer your question?
no, that does. That perfectly does. Yeah. I think a lot of people just want advice instead of everyone just saying, just go to law school, you'll be fine. Like you can go off to do anything you want after, but spending that much money and time, people want to be sure about what they're doing. Yeah, and then as I mentioned before, law is like an ever-changing field. Do you think there's any challenges for lawyers in the next decade or like 5 to 10 years for like people who are just graduating high school or going into grad school?
Yeah, so the biggest areas are post-COVID uh and technological changes.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, excuse me, the biggest
Right.
areas, there's sort of like a ceremony to practicing law where you would have to
Mhm.
go into the chambers or into the courtroom, uh, and depending on what type of motion you have. And and actually speak with a judge and dress, obviously in a suit with a tie,
Mhm.
and so and you have a crowded courtroom and your case gets called one by one. So there's a lot of ceremony and procedure to it. During COVID, I don't, did you know that all the courtrooms shut down because of COVID? Like everything.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
that.
which is incredible. Like, right,
Yeah.
like there's thousands and thousands of cases and they
Cases,
all like
yeah.
got stopped. Criminal cases.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Like not just
Mhm.
civil, but criminal. Um, yeah, it was incredible. Um, and so they had to figure out a way to get people back to get these, the cases back on track.
Mhm.
And started with the criminal because you can't just indefinitely detain someone and there are a bunch of legal issues.
Yeah.
And there's still fights right now about decisions DAs made, district attorneys made in terms of how to handle criminal cases. Like
Mhm.
in Dublin, like there's still very vocal, adamant people in our community that they're
Yeah.
upset with certain decisions that were made during COVID. And then civil too. It's like you can't wait forever to get. Like for example, trade secret guy, you can't wait forever to protect to stop someone from stealing his information.
Yeah.
Um, so um, so they open up courtrooms. This long story short, they open up courtrooms, but to Zoom to Zoom links,
Yeah.
where a lot of especially California state court, a lot of them you almost that's the first choice. I mean, you walk into a courtroom, it's completely empty, and there's have you been to a courtroom recently in California State
We
Court?
went last year, but since then, no.
Okay, yeah, you go in the
Yeah.
courtroom, you're there for like a hearing, there's like 20 cases on calendar or something,
Yeah.
and there's a massive screen behind you. Like it's state court, so it's like an old school pull down,
Yeah.
pull down screen behind you with like everyone appearing in their little Zoom boxes,
Mhm.
behind you. And then maybe you're the one person sitting there in the chamber, in the courtroom to
Yeah.
make an argument. So it's completely changed. Like so that's made it way more accessible to people representing themselves extremely more because judges are more lenient, like they're more, they're a little more laid back in terms of
Mhm.
enforcing, certain the ceremony or the procedures, and it's more open to like individuals in there. So yeah, it opens it up immensely. It's a huge change. And then depositions. Have you done talked about depositions
No, we
before?
haven't, no.
Depositions, like really, it's actually probably the thing I enjoy most about litigation.
Yeah.
Depositions basically like you get a witness or someone that knows something about the case, and
Okay.
then you get to ask them whatever you want on the record, and they're sworn to
Okay.
tell the truth, and they
Okay.
can't just say, "No, I'm not going to answer that." Like you get to keep pressing for an answer. It's fun,
Yeah.
as long as it's relevant, but it's fun. Depositions got started being taken remotely, which is a
Mhm.
huge change. So technology was a big change. And AI is not there yet. I don't know if you've done research in high school on AI yet.
I think
But
in high school, especially right now, a lot of people are getting caught for using AI, and I just want to know if like in law, it's like kind of looked down upon, or is it just people use it as like more of like assistance rather than just like getting all their information from it because being a high schooler, I've like met a lot of people who have done it and they just like, oh, we won't get caught. But I just want to know if that applies to law right now.
um, yeah, you don't want to use. You can't. I mean, I actually don't know the current rules of professional conduct if it's
Mhm.
completely not allowed, but I don't use it. You don't want to you don't use it.
Yeah.
There's like I could give you an example, like a classic one if you want
Yeah.
to of AI. I'll give you two examples, one personal and like one
Mhm.
classical. The personal one's really obvious. Like, sometimes you go on Google and you can research like, how laws work, or something, or what, in California, what's the statute of limitations for bridge contract, for a written
Yeah.
contract or something. You Google that and like a bunch of AI answers will like pop up at the beginning with
Yeah.
links. And you look at the
Yeah.
links and like the link is like completely unrelated to the AI answer.
Yeah.
It's completely off. It's like, well, that was a bad AI for that. So, so I mean, I would never trust it. But then the classic one that's kind of topical is do you know Michael Cohen and Donald Trump? Like, are you familiar
Yeah.
with them?
Yeah.
Michael Cohen was his former fixer
Yeah.
attorney.
Yeah.
Okay, so Michael Cohen, I thought this was pretty fun. So Michael Cohen, was convicted of, I think, tax fraud.
Yeah.
And he was trying to mitigate his sentence, and he was working with an attorney, and they used AI to put together a brief, like to appeal. Do you already know the story?
No, I don't know this story. I knew he was
Okay. Yeah,
convicted.
I think
Yeah.
it's chat. I think it's chat. Is it chat PT or something, or chat?
ChatGPT. Yeah.
Yeah, ChatGPT. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's using that to help do legal research for his brief, and then it made up cases with like fake case names, fake titles, and fake numbers. Where you could
Yeah.
like pull up, yeah, fake cases to say the points that they wanted to make. Like, hey, it
Yeah.
was like filling in the blanks, and they cited it in their brief on these cases. Michael Cohen like
Yeah.
originally did the research and they put it in there. And his attorney like didn't. We call it shepherdizing, but the attorney
Mhm.
like didn't double check the sites basically, and then included the brief they filed. And then this is in federal court. In
Yeah.
federal court, I'm not sure you've been to federal court versus state court,
Yeah,
but
I've just been to like the district court. Yeah.
we'll see. You haven't been to district court. Okay, so
Sorry?
you've seen the difference. You've been to federal district court then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you've seen the difference between that and
Yeah.
state court in terms of
Yeah.
resources. Yeah, resources. Every case you see a team of clerks walk in, and these clerks are like the top of the law school. They have to be like top 5%
Hmm.
of a very good law school. So they're like the best of the best in terms of.
Hmm.
So they're filing this in federal court, where you have these best clerks, and of course they're going to look at these cases.
Hmm.
Like, what the heck? And they can't just stop there because these are the best of the best.
Yeah.
So they start trying to figure out like where did this case come from? What did he mean to cite? What's going on? So they put like all this time into it, and it's like this doesn't even the case doesn't
Exist.
exist.
Yeah.
So the judge ended up like sanctioning him and his lawyer, which was, obviously a bad outcome,
Yeah.
but completely avoidable. And then, then the story got, more interesting because Donald Trump was charged in New York State
Hmm.
Court with what did he falsified business records to give himself, to help violate different law, like avoid taxes or um, well, hide like political donations.
Yeah.
So anyway, Michael Cohen was like one of the major witnesses for it, and so there's something called impeaching when you have a witness on the stand, where
Yeah.
yeah. So they were using to say that Michael Cohen had a bad character, or he
Hmm.
often told falsehoods. They were using the fact he got sanctioned for filing a case with with fake cases against him. Saying, "Oh, well, here you lied to the court and made up these cases." So they're
Yeah.
using it as a way to like make the jury less trusting of him. So I thought it was kind of funny that
Yeah.
it all started off with him using AI to do research, and then it ends up, it's probably going to follow him every time he testifies. Someone might bring up him citing a fake
Yeah.
case accidentally
Yeah.
in an appellate brief. So it's kind of a funny story. So is that
No,
a good
that's
example?
yeah, that's a perfect example.
Yeah. So that's why law
Um,
firms don't use AI.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to know, is there a habit or a mindset that you think really helped you succeed in your career or your field that you're in right now?
Yeah. Yeah, for me personally, there's a Thomas Edison quote, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration.
Hmm.
And I repeated that to myself daily, my first year of law school, uh, because it's a lot of work,
Yeah.
and there's no way around it. No one, you know, I mean, there's people that they just show up to a courtroom, or you see them in movies where they have so much charisma that they just walk in and all the light like focuses on them, but they don't just show up and do that. They have to behind the scenes do a lot of work, and there's so much preparation,
Yeah.
especially if you're not one of those people, and you're one of the people that have to grind through. There's so much work to where you have to just know everything about it.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that kind of work ethic is required.
Okay.
So that's my favorite quote.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a really good way to wrap everything up. Thank you so much for joining me today and
Thank you for having
sharing
me.
for sharing your journey and advice. I think it's been a really insightful conversation. I think a lot of people can take a lot of things away from it. Is there anything you'd like to add before we end?
If you have friends or something that are curious,
Mhm.
tell them to feel free. They can email me,
Okay,
and
yeah.
I'm happy to talk to them if they have any questions about like how to get started,
Yeah.
especially ones that have already graduated law school. They're like looking to get into law school. I can talk
Mhm.
to them too. I
Okay.
have a lot of good tips for studying for law school. I can
Okay,
share.
yeah.
Talk to you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.